Boys and girls, welcome to Yoast to Coast. Welcome to the Barrister and Mann interview. Glad to have you here. Got my Colt 45 today. I'm keeping it classy. DJ, my buddy, what's up? Keeping it classy with some Colt 45 today. Waiting on Mr. William himself. Grandmaster, what's up, buddy? Castle Shave, Ryan is... Yes, it's today. It's today. Waiting on the man, the myth himself. Speak of the devil.
Today I learned I'm a myth.
You're upside down.
Oh, I was hoping that would work a little better. Oh well. Here, hang on a second.
You're good.
All right. Oh, look, I'm low.
A little bit.
All right, cool.
Perfect. Wait for a few more people to show up.
All right.
How are you doing this evening?
Not too bad, thanks. You?
Doing fantastic. I've been looking forward to this interview.
Me too.
What are you drinking?
Just a seltzer. Trying to
Oh,
get rid of them. These watermelon seltzers aren't so good. This company makes a really, really nice lime seltzer, but the watermelon's not so good, so I'm trying to work through them.
just trying to push yourself through it. I get it.
Yeah.
Well, I thought I'd keep it classy tonight. I'm going with a Colt 45.
All right.
That is the extent of my budget right now.
Well, I gotta go finish a soap patch, so no booze for me.
Gotcha. Fair enough. Fair enough. Somebody said, "Are you both going to the Shaves West?" I personally am not. I don't know about you. Okay.
I got a whole lot of things going on the next couple of months. I'm not gonna be able to make it.
Understandable. Well, let's get started. We got a good, healthy group here right now. How about you start by introducing yourself, telling people who you are? Because granted, almost everybody knows who you are. But let's start off because I'm sure there's some people here who are newer to the hobby and stuff like that, and maybe just want to get to know Barrister and Mann and everything behind it.
All right. So my name is Will Carius. I started Barrister and Mann 6 years ago. This 1 week. Wow. So our 6th anniversary was 1 week ago yesterday. So that was a lot harder for me to say than I thought it was going to.
I noticed, but you pushed through it. I'm proud of you, though. Good job.
Yeah, I had to get some thought.
So let me ask you, what pushed you to, I hear it everywhere, and I ask everybody, but what pushed you to want to start making your own soap?
Okay, so I have super, super sensitive skin. I was actually diagnosed with rosacea a few months ago. And general shaving products did not work well for me. Cartridge razors still do not work well for me. Then I'm terribly prone to ingrown hairs. And so I fell into wet shaving just sort of by wandering around Reddit for a bit. And I don't actually remember how I found Wicked Edge, but I did.
Okay.
And it was tiny then. It was like 7,000 people. It was this little itty-bitty subreddit. Now it's, I think, 110 or 120,000 people. It's immense.
Wow.
Yeah. So far as I know, it's actually the largest single membership wet shaving group on the web.
And that's still around, right?
Yeah. No, it's still active. It's, there are new discussions every day. Some of them are sort of repetitive, but the thing about it is that it picks up a lot of new people and kind of gets them interested, and that's really the way it should go.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
Anyway, so I came across it and I shaved with soap and a double-edged razor for about 5-6 months, and I saw a pretty decent improvement. And it occurred to me at the time that what was really happening was that the wet shaving revival was being driven by small batch artisans, which is still pretty much the case.
Sure.
Although now a lot of bigger venture capital backed companies are trying to get into the game because they look at the shaving soap world and see dollar signs.
Oh, 100%.
But so I was like, well, okay, you know what? I mean, I have an internet connection. If these people can do it, I can do it. So I spent 5 months or so developing a shaving soap formula, and I sent it to a few people on Reddit, and I tried it out, and I got some feedback from them, and they sent me some notes, and I tinkered with it more, and I was like, okay, cool, this is perfectly workable. I'm plenty happy with this, and my real problem with shaving at the time, with wet shaving at the time, was that shaving soap scents were pretty damn boring.
Sure.
At the time, I mean, like, the big fragrance makers in the wet shaving world were, the old British houses, the R. Harris, Geoff Trumper, Trufford and Hill, which, yeah, okay, that's great. They're classic fragrances and whatnot, but most of the fragrances that they make are not my cup of tea. And then the other really big kind of fragrance maker at the time was Castle Forbes. And Castle Forbes turns out really nice stuff, but their stuff is very simple, and I was looking for something a little bit different, and I was just looking for something else. So I started messing around with different fragrances, and then I was called upon to do a legal internship in San Francisco, which is, of course, a notoriously expensive place to live.
Sure, absolutely.
And so I went, okay, I need something to pay my living expenses because, like most legal internships, it was unpaid.
Yeah.
And eventually what ended up happening was that I was paying $650 a month to live in what amounted to a lofted broom closet. In Bayview, no less. I don't know if you've ever been to San Francisco or if anybody else has been, but Bayview was one of the rougher areas in San Francisco.
Okay.
It was Upper Bayview, and one of the funny things about San Francisco is that the higher the elevation, the lower the crime rate. It's true because thieves aren't going to run uphill.
I don't. I mean, you're not wrong.
Yeah, but I needed something to pay for this exorbitant rate, and so I figured, all right, well, I'll sell shaving soap, and we'll do it for a few months, and if I come back from San Francisco, and I shut it down, it'll have done everything I ever asked of it, and so I launched the company on March 18th, 2013, and within like 2 weeks, couldn't make soap fast enough because I was trying to balance making shaving soap with, going to law school full time.
Sure.
And so I called my parents, who thankfully lived relatively close, and I went, okay, I got a problem. I was like, I can't make soap fast enough, and I need this thing to carry on for like another 4 or 5 months. So my father, being the enterprising and sometimes overly trusting human being that he is, went, all right, we'll bring it home and we'll take care of it here, because my parents had been professional bakers, and so there's a fair amount of equipment overlap. They still had all the equipment, and that's largely how we do it now. We still largely use food grade equipment to do the work.
Just because the sheer volume that you have.
Yeah, and also one of the classic ways to make hot process soap, because it's very difficult to make cold process shaving soap that's of any reasonable quality, because by the time you have enough stearic acid in the formula to make it work, you are going to have seized soap, and seized soap tends to be pretty toxic and pretty corrosive. So you need high temperature, and one of the ways to do it is to use a crock pot, but the process of using a crock pot is very slow. In a lot of respects, it's very difficult. It's dangerous. I got burned, I can't tell you how many times in those first few months.
Oh, I bet.
And the other problem that you have is you run the risk of scorching the tallow. Tallow scorches really, really easily. So instead what we do is we use basically a machine very similar to a chocolate boiler. Okay.
So you use like a double boiler, more or less?
Yeah, very similar, yeah.
Okay.
And so that helps that prevents us from scorching the tallow.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. So, I can't, returning to the original question, I came back from San Francisco. The company was still making money. We were still selling a lot of soap. The legal market was not really looking so good. And in a lot of respects is still kind of,
I got to do it.
But so I said, okay, well, you know what? I'll finish school. I'll take the bar. I'll pass the bar. I'll get my license, which I did finally after 5 years after graduating. I was sworn in to practice law last Thursday.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And so, but in the meantime, I was like, all right, well, we'll make shaving soap, and that's just what I'm going to do for a while. But,
so you've gone through this journey that has now become Barrister and Mann. I personally don't know. What does the Barrister and Mann stand for? What is the name? Is that name related to you? Is there something more behind it?
Literally everyone asks me this question. So, the original name of the company was Soap Makers of Awesome Town, which was sarcastically suggested by the woman I was dating at the time. And actually, a couple of years ago, we released an April Fool's Day soap called Soap Makers of Awesome Town for that very reason.
Okay, that's pretty awesome, actually.
And actually, the base formula that we unveiled for that soap served as sort of the beta release for what eventually became Barrister's Reserve.
Okay.
Excuse me, but I decided that I needed a name that sounded a bit more distinguished.
Sure.
And I wanted something that sounded like, one of those old British soap houses or tailoring houses or whatever. And, so I went, okay, well, what do I do here? And so a barrister is an English attorney, which made sense because I was in law school. And Mann came from the fact that the line was originally intended for men, although I have gone on record several times saying that I think that most of the fragrances that we make are pretty unisex and could really go either way.
I can see that. Matter of fact, I have a daughter who is almost 17, and she stole my patches when she was here over the weekend.
There you
she
go.
said, "Dad, do you use that one?" I said, "Well, not currently." She was, "Okay, it's mine."
Problem solved.
Problem solved. That's awesome. So now I have to ask you, to be honest, I've probably tried 2 or 3 year soaps, like big full size. I've got a couple samples. Seville, one for me, I bought as a sample like 3 years ago when I first started, and to this day, really intrigues me. I don't know. I think I read a description like it was like an early worldly scent, like early 1900s. Am I right with that? The Lavandel. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. That was the early 1900s that it was.
Yeah.
The fragrance that it's based on is actually still technically in production.
Okay.
That's made by the House of Caron, and it's not what it once was.
Sure.
Largely because the perfumer at the House of Caron, Richard Frace, has basically taken a hacksaw to the entire line and just pulled these fragrances apart. The IFRA and the EU have pretty much lobotomized a lot of classic perfumery by banning various materials. And the firm that manufactured the base that made the original fragrance what it was went bankrupt in 1957.
Oh, wow.
And the formula was not lost. All the assets were purchased by what is now the perfume giant Simrise. At the time, I think, was technically an offshoot of Harman and Reimer,
Okay.
which is now long gone firm. But so the company Dallaire was run by the House of Dallaire, the Dallaire family, and Marie Dallaire presided over the company when they developed this material called isobutyl quinoline. And it was common practice at the time for these various manufacturers to create perfume bases to showcase the capabilities of their work, of these new materials that they were developing.
Sure.
And so Marie Dallaire, who was probably one of the greatest perfumers in history, but was an unsung genius even then, and has now largely been forgotten, designed this base called Mousse de Saxe, or Saxon moss. And so the House of Caron was run by a Russian immigrant named Ernest Deltroff. He didn't start the company, but he bought it and turned it into what it was.
Okay.
And so he was an entirely self-taught perfumer, and he had a real thing for Mousse de Saxe and used it in not everything, but like it may as well have been everything. And so the original Mousse de Saxe, back in its originally formulated form, lent this kind of velvety, sexy, sort of slightly bitter character to whatever you included it in. And so it made an appearance in Pour un Homme de Caron, which was the fragrance on which La Vanille is based.
Okay.
And various other very famous fragrances, some of which have survived intact, or as intact as they're going to be, some of which have been completely butchered and are unrecognizable from their earlier formulations. But anyway, so Mousse de Saxe basically disappeared when the House of Dallaire went under, and Simrise, for whatever reason, has never seen fit to make it. So I was able to obtain a small sample from a friend of mine who knew somebody at Simrise, because apparently they make it for their internal perfume school, but don't make it for any other purpose.
Really?
And so he had a vial of this stuff that he sent to me, and I tried to put it back together by smell. What was funny was that I was working from a mistranslation of the original formula, and so the translation that I read said that the original stuff had iodine in it, and I was like, well, I'm not going to put iodine in a skincare fragrance. That would be insane.
Yeah.
So I replaced the iodine with seaweed absolute, which I still use. Turned out that the actual term that they meant was ionone, which is a totally different kind of material. And is very powdery and smells like violets and berries, and it just creates a completely different kind of fragrance.
Sure.
But I got kind of attached to my sort of rough and dark version of it. And if I were to change it now, I'd probably wreck La Vanille beyond comparison. And so I've just left it alone, and I've done various other things with my version of Mousse de Saxe since. And people seem to enjoy it. I really enjoy it, and I like the kind of dark character that it brings to things. So.
I do too, and that's one thing too. Now it's funny because that was one of my first that I bought overall. One of my first I bought from you. One of my first overall when I got into the hobby and started like getting the bug to go start buying everything on the market, trying everything out there. And of course, and this is funny because just I've been doing it about 3 years now. When I started off 3 years ago. When I started doing some research, your name always came up. Whenever it came to anything, Barrister and Mann was probably one of the first few names that always showed up. So granted, here we are 3 years later, and I've met thousands of people who do this hobby. For some reason, your soap's always in the top 5. Why is that?
Because I piss people off.
Okay, jackass. No, seriously, what makes your soap?
But here's the thing. I mean, there's an old line that says there's no such thing as bad publicity. I don't agree with that, having been on the end of some really bad publicity over the years. But the thing is that I've stuck to this belief that we can push the envelope and we can make fragrances that are different. And the thing about making fragrances that are different is that there are going to be a lot of people who don't like them, and there are going to be a lot of people who do like them. And the people who don't like them will make it known. And the people who do like them will make it known to the people who don't like them that they like them. And, so it goes back and forth. But the thing is that so much conversation engenders interest. And so I hear from people, people try things. And my view has always been, look, you're not going to like everything that we make. I don't want you to like everything that we make. I want you to try something that is right for you. I want you to try things out. I want you to see what's possible. I want you to see what we're doing because we think it's really cool, and we hope that you think it's really cool too. But that's really what it is that there's so much discussion because I piss people off. And I want it to be understood that I'm really not trying to do that. I don't try to make things that people will hate. I try to make things that I think are interesting and different. And
I applaud you for that. I applaud you for that personally. And I've, through my little group and my experiences, there's a thing with Barrister and Mann that performance-wise across the board, pretty much you're on top. But your scents are either you love them or you hate them.
Yeah.
And there's kind of like no in-between. And I've kind of found that personally too. But I applaud you for your adventurism, how you want to try and do something a little different outside the box. And I think with everyone wanting to get a piece of the pie now and, all these startup companies coming out wanting to do the shave soap, which, more power to them. What do you think is what's keeping you motivated? What's keeping you to keep creating these different scents? Are you looking after are you trying to chase scents now, or are you trying to chase performance? You've already got a great base. To be honest, I haven't tried Excelsior. What's keeping you going? What's keeping you going every day to stay at that top five for everybody?
Um, for years, I have predicted the arrival of this thing that I refer to as the performance singularity.
Okay.
The idea that there will eventually come a time where the performance of artisanal shaving soaps, because let's be honest, commercial shaving soaps are way behind us.
Oh, 100%.
Um, the performance of artisanal shaving soaps will eventually reach a point whereby the differences between them will be minute.
Discernible.
Yeah, and I mean, like, they'll be discernible to a few people, and of course, everybody will have their favorites. And for some people, the differences will be greater than minute.
Yeah.
But by and large, the differences between the top bases will be tiny. And I am very much of the view that we have largely reached that point. You know, there will be further incremental improvements, but they will not be the leaps and bounds that we saw when wet shaving first started to come back into vogue.
Sure.
That said, every so often I have a look at the formula, and I have a look at the formulas of what everybody else is doing, and I have a look at the performance, and I try to keep on top of what's going on in the market every so often. And I'll look at the formula and go, maybe it's time that I went back at this and gave it another shot and polished it up and went from there. And really what this actually entails is that I do a complete teardown and spend like 8 months to a year developing a new formula. Because really what ends up happening is that I'm looking for something very specific and I stop when I've found it.
Well, and that's good.
But I'm also not one of those people who will tinker endlessly with a soap formula because, excuse me, for one thing, it creates severe inconsistency. People don't feel that they can trust a product when you change formulas a lot.
I can see that.
For some people who deal in much smaller batches and are happy to do that, that's fine. That works for them. I do not begrudge them that in any way. We sell a lot of soap. If I were to start changing formulas from batch to batch, it would drive people crazy. I mean,
100%.
I would get hate mail. And I mean, like, it's just, you have to have a predictable product. You have to have a good product and a predictable product. So really where we are at this point is that I push the fragrances because I like fragrances. And that's really what I enjoy doing. I mean, like, I have, this entire shelf of material, which is currently in a bit of disarray, and is not even the entirety of my material. But I like unusual things. I like materials that can be used in new and inventive ways. I like things that conjure different visuals. When we did petrichor a couple of years ago, I thought that was really cool. I thought it was cool to capture that smell. When we did Vespers, I thought that was really cool because I had a very vivid picture in my...
Oh, you're back. I see you. Mm-hmm. Hey, real quick, I hate to cut you off. People are saying they can't see you. Ever since we had that little glitch, you disappeared. I can see you too. All right, he's going to join. He's going to rejoin. Let me know if you guys can see it. Let me know if you can see me. Let me know if you can see him. Let me know if you can see anything. Just give me something. He's gone, yes. He's back. Let's try this again. I can't read your lips because I can't see them, but I can read your text.
All right.
Okay, guys. I see you. Guys, do you see him? Let's wait and see what a few comments say. I'm not in the basement. Thank you, Mikey. I'm in my bathroom. It looks like Will is in a bunker. Somebody said they still can't. Yost, are you growing a goatee? Yes, I am. We see you, but the quality wasn't there before since the glitch. Okay, you're back. We'll just let it go.
All right.
So let's keep going.
Okay,
cool. When I post this on my YouTube later, hopefully everything will be good. Everyone's saying you're here, so perfect.
Sorry in advance, people.
So a couple other things is, now that you've made this, how long has your Excelsior base been out?
Since November.
Do you think at this point this is your top shelf? This is your peak? I know you never want to settle, but at this point, are you happy with where you're at?
Yeah. Yes. But the thing is that between Excelsior and Reserve, they appeal to different types of shavers. You know, they just appeal to people looking for different things. I like them both, but I would be the first to admit that they are not the same base. They behave differently. They have certain differences in performance. Excelsior, in a lot of respects, was my attempt to correct the sort of weirdly finicky nature of Reserve. Some people would say that I have not been successful. Other people would say that I've been very successful. It comes down to user experience. You know, it does what I wanted it to do, and so I'm happy with it.
Now, between the two bases, and I watched your West Coast shaving video from about 8 months ago, were you talking about the Reserve line when you were trying to show how to lather and how to throw water at it?
Yes.
Okay. So now, granted, I don't know who the guys you were speaking with. I've never watched, to be honest, I've never watched anything West Coast shaving. A buddy of mine told me to watch the video ahead of time. I did. And I learned a lot. I learned what a soap nerd you were. That's a compliment, by the way. But listening to you talk about it with the amount of swirls you use and about how to throw how much water at it and people aren't adding enough, I think somebody touched on that in the video. Do you feel that you need to tell people that ahead of time?
I've struggled with this question.
Okay.
Because what I found is that a lot of times when I tell folks things, they don't listen to me anyway.
No, I get it.
That's got nothing to do. That's not a slight on anyone. It's just human nature. You like to figure things out for yourself. You like to try what works for you, and I understand that. I have included it in the directions on the website, such that if people wish to go back and see, oh, maybe they addressed this in some way, you know, let me check and see if there's something in the notes, then there's something there for them. More often than not, what'll actually happen is that I get a contact form submission, or I get a Facebook message, or I get a Reddit message or something. Occasionally people will call me. And so they say to me, well, I can't get it to work. It seems like glue. It's like, you're not adding enough water. Or in some cases, they're not adding enough soap. And, you know, that's rare in Reserve, but it does happen. The nature of Excelsior, the firmer nature of Excelsior makes it more likely with Excelsior. But, it happens either way. But it's not really born of like a disenchantment with with what people will do and how they will read, but more a belief that people like to find things out for themselves. They like to do things for themselves. Wet shaving is a hobby premised on the idea of self-reliance and independence. That's kind of, that's half the fun of it. And so people a lot of times don't want me to tell them. Or if they do, they take it with a grain of salt and they kind of set that information aside, and then maybe if they have a problem, they come back to it at some point later. But, label space is limited. especially on our labels, because my formulas tend to be long and complicated. And I can only put so many things on a label before it's just a wall of text, and nobody's really going to pay attention anyway. And so I prefer to interact with people on a person-to-person basis and help advise them on their individual preferences and help them get it for them. So I have resisted that. I've resisted that practice.
So now, do you think it's because of your formula that has created this having trouble lather? I mean, obviously you weren't going for that. You weren't trying to make it confusing, I wouldn't think. But what makes your soap harder to lather to some respect? Like, for instance, when somebody says what soaps are hard to lather, granted, I figured it out now, but at the time, PAA's CK6 formula, which is a great vegan formula, I found it to be overly thirsty. I found that it would dry out on me really quick. It would get really thick. But I found that if I used a good Silvertip Badger and I threw a lot of water at it, man, it would just perform like crazy. But that took me figuring it out, talking to Doug, talking to other people's experiences, which it doesn't bother me. But I like the process. I like trying to figure it out. I like other people's experiences. I like that everyone has a different feel. So I was just curious to what makes this base so much different that is causing people to maybe have to work a little harder or a little differently.
In the case of Reserve, it's the consistency.
Okay.
It's the fact that it's very soft. It does grow firmer as it gets older. However, we simply do not possess the kind of storage capacity that, say, Martin Condra has, and so we couldn't age thousands of jars of soap at a time.
Sure.
In order to prevent that, it's just not possible. And I don't know of a single artisanal soap maker in the United States for whom that is a possibility on that kind of scale.
Absolutely.
I think people are. Less so than they used to be, but I think people are not really familiar with soaps that are this soft. Although that I think is changing. There are certain soaps that are really soft that are in vogue at the moment, and they tend to perform extremely well. And part of that is, I think, due to the fact that you end up with a lot of soap and a little bit of water. What Brian Sharp famously coined as the ultra lather, the idea that you have just enough water to make a usable lather, but the rest of the lather is majority soap solids.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's easier with the softer soap, but it's also kind of weird, especially if you're not used to it.
Yeah.
And
well, didn't you kind of coin the term low structure lather?
Yes, to which Reddit has reacted rather more violently than I expected.
To be honest, it's been a godsend because I used to get shit for the longest time about my lather technique, but I prefer the dense, low structure lather. And whether it's my technique or it's the soap or how people are starting to make stuff, I like that thick, dense, creamy lather versus the big, fluffy stuff. I noticed that I can take a good soap and I can ruin it by putting it in a scuttle and fluffing it up and whipping it up. It just seems like it totally changes my experience.
Yep.
And so when I'm speaking to a good friend of mine, and I was mentioning the low structure thing, and he said that's a thing, and William coined that term. So I guess I owe you copyright every time I say that term.
Don't worry, we'll just call it a fair use license.
But honestly, I watch thousands of guys lather all day long, whether that's weird or not. I don't know. I enjoy it. I enjoy the hobby. But I'll take a soap, whether it's yours or somebody else's that I know performs consistently and does very good, but I can whip it up 3 different ways and have 3 totally different shaving experiences. Mm-hmm. And I think it's cool, but it's unfair to people like you, to somebody who comes and says, I'm gonna get a scuttle, I'm gonna do it this way, and they shave it at once and be like, this stuff sucks, and they toss it out. I think you should give everything a few different tries. That's why when I started doing reviews, that I kind of gravitated away from the term of a review to more of a first impression. Mm-hmm. Because, like I said, your razor, your lathering technique, your brush, the amount of water, the type of soap, the amount of effort you put into it, it's all going to make a difference. And it all depends on how much you want to commit to it. If you just want to throw water in a little bit, balloon of soap and rub it up and put it on your face and be done, that's fine. But there's so much more that I think there is potential for, depending on how your lathering technique is.
Agreed. Agreed, absolutely.
So what is your Excelsior base? What's the difference between that and the Reserve? And are you phasing out the Reserve, or is this like an alternative?
This is an alternative. Excelsior is really an upgrade of the older Glissant base, which had replaced the original white label and black label bases. I felt that Glissant, after three or 4 years, I'm actually not sure if it's 3 or 4 years now, had grown a little long in the tooth, and 3 or 4 years in the wet shaving world is an eternity. When somebody can turn out 10 or 12 test batches and 10 or 12 formula refinements in the course of a week. It's almost like in the late 90s, where the next generation of computers was like 8,000 times better, and the processors were expanding at astonishing rates, and it was just like you'd buy a computer, it'd be obsolete in 6 months.
Yeah,
because of that aforementioned performance singularity, that is less of a problem than it used to be. In around 2014, 2015, 2016, soaps were advancing at just an absolutely astonishing rate.
Yeah.
And the technology, the various techniques that we all were using was just advancing at a tremendous rate. And so as it slowed down, I developed the Reserve formula, partly because I felt that the Reserve fragrances were special and needed a special base.
Okay.
I also came to the conclusion that there are lots and lots of people who have lanolin sensitivities, which when I got started in this business, I did not know at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard from a lot of people over the years that they can't use lanolin, and I was like, okay, well, I don't really care for vegan bases, excuse me, with a few notable exceptions, but it's generally not my thing. And we did make a vegan soap for a while, and what we found was that people far preferred the tallow soaps.
Yeah, for the most part, absolutely.
Yeah, just kind of on a regular, just as sort of a marketing thing. People were just more likely to buy the tallow soap than they were the vegan soap. And I went, okay, well, let me see if I can produce a tallow soap that has a really, really great face feel without using lanolin, because lanolin had long been seen as like this almost magical ingredient that would take a mediocre soap and make its face feel, just exemplary, which is not really true, but that was the perception. And so I spent, 8 or 10 months, I think, developing Reserve, and had initially declared it a failure, and then decided to try one more batch where we pushed the lather ratio, the lye ratio, all the way to 100% potassium, just to see what it would do. And it was basically, it was goo. It was just almost disgusting, but it shaved really, really, really well. And I went, okay, well, this is promising. And so I sort of backed the lye ratio off a bit in an attempt to make it firmer and easier to work with. But Excelsior is kind of a different idea. Excelsior, when I developed Excelsior, I sought to take a lot of the things that I learned in the development of Reserve, namely that, using, for lack of a better term, synthetic lathering agents, although the lathering agents that we use are refined from natural materials.
Okay.
But synthetic lathering agents can support the lather in soap materials cannot. And so the idea was to replace Glissant, which had grown, as I said, a bit obsolete, if I'm being completely honest, with something that better reflected everything that we now know about shaving soap chemistry. And so I sort of soft debuted it to give people some time to adjust to it and, kind of let people get comfortable with the idea. And then we're going to start changing over the Glissant soaps to Excelsior. And we expect to have them all changed over by the end of the year. And I just think it's a better soap. I think the post-shave feel is better. I think its hard water resistance is dramatically better. But really what's going to happen is we're currently operating with 3 soap bases as we transition. But when Glissant is gone, then it'll just be Reserve and Excelsior. And so the Reserve soaps will be for people who like the Reserve fragrances or who can't use lanolin or have incredibly hard water or whatever and, you know, don't mind a softer soap. And then the Excelsior soaps will be for people who like my original compositions, who like lanolin, who maybe prefer a firmer soap, you know, and who just like different things. So, you know, I mean, options are good.
Well, I see the chat is blowing up, and I hate to stop you real quick, but I know people are dying to ask you some questions. And some of the few things I've seen is, what are your top 3 soaps besides your own? If you use anybody else's, what do you use besides your own? And somebody also mentioned who handles your marketing and social media side of your brand?
Okay, so I'll take these in order. In terms of my favorite soaps, I still really, really like the Declaration Bison base. I know that Icarus is very much in vogue at the moment, and it's a great soap, but Bison just performs better for me. Again, that low structure lather thing really really works well for my skin.
It's fantastic.
I like a lot of grooming department stuff. I've tried several grooming department soaps in the last 6 months or so. I think it's very good soap. Fragrances don't always do it for me, but I appreciate the fact that Mo is, you know, going out there and trying new stuff. I like Holy Cow. I think it's very good soap. Again, not all the fragrances do it for me, but you know, Shri is doing really interesting stuff with high perfume and all that, and all the, you know, the history that comes with it. And you know what? I also like whomever makes the soap for Australian Private Reserve is doing a really, really nice job. That's really good soap. I even have the older base, and I really liked it. So
interesting, very cool. I have a few questions here that are from some of my audience from earlier today. I've kind of touched on them here and there, but granted, you've already touched on it that you like to do scents that are kind of outside the norm, a little different than everybody else. Have there been any that you've been wanting to create that maybe you've been unsuccessful with, or you've yet to figure out how to really capture what you're looking for, and what inspires you to want to make these scents? Because granted, I don't have many of your soaps, but I've read your descriptions, and they're bizarre, and I love it. And I love it. What the hell is childhood memories? But I want to smell it.
So, admittedly, the childhood memories thing was based very much on my individual memory of kindergarten.
Okay.
And somebody said to me, well, you know, why rose and grapefruit and tangerine? And it's like, well, okay, when I was a kid, I was in choir. Yeah, choir. And they used to have us sell, like, citrus fruit in the wintertime as a fundraising thing. And so my mother, being the dutiful, you know, middle school mother, would buy a case of grapefruit every winter. And so she'd eat a lot of grapefruit. I always remembered the grapefruit. And then the thing is that Play-Doh is fragranced heavily with rose-like molecules. It doesn't really smell like rose, but it's rosy.
Okay.
And you know, the warm blankets thing I just always loved. And little kids eat clementines and tangerines because they're little fruits for little hands. But in terms of the one that I really wish to do that I have yet to figure out, I have long been attempting to capture the exact fragrance profile of fresh rosemary. And I gotta tell you, Brian, it's damn difficult.
Don't you just distill rosemary and call it a day?
No, because so there are 3 or 4 different kinds of rosemary oil, and there's one in particular that comes fairly close to fresh rosemary, but doesn't quite get there. But some other versions of rosemary smell almost like Vicks VapoRub. And
weird.
I love rosemary and I love Vicks VapoRub, but I never smell.
Not together.
Yeah, I never smell rosemary and go, gee, that smells like Vicks. So yeah, that's the one that I've really wanted to do that I just haven't been able to figure out yet.
Has there been any that you've produced that you thought would do better than they didn't, or vice versa?
I didn't expect night music to be nearly as polarizing as it is. For that matter, I didn't expect Rome to be nearly as polarizing as it is. What I've always said to people is that, you know, because occasionally I'll see some commentary and people are like, well, I don't know what Will is thinking. You know, it seems like he's just gone completely off the rails. And what I often say to people is, I almost never make something that I want people to hate. No, I never make something that I want people to hate. And what I said to one guy at Maggard last year was, if I want to piss you off, you'll know it. So, I mean, like, those are the two that really come to mind as things that kind of caught me off guard. Oh, and you know what? Anise and vetiver, but I think that's more the fact that I don't understand people's dislike of licorice. I happen to love licorice, and so I thought anise and vetiver was really cool. But, you know, there were a bunch of people who just weren't into it, and I got some pretty serious feedback about it. And I was like, maybe I won't make this again.
So when you are naming your scents or you're describing them, are you purposely beating around the bush instead of saying this is tangerine and oranges and a warm blanket? Are you doing that on purpose, or are you just trying to be different? Like you were mentioning, like as soon as you said licorice, let me show you something. I've been on the hunt for a sandalwood scent that doesn't smell like my grandpa. And I found some, and I don't mean that in a rude way, but I mean there's like this sweet, like Proraso Red to me screams 90-year-old man from when I was 10 years old. Overpowering, sweet, and just, I don't know, I don't like it. Lather Bros made this stuff called Winwood, and it's pineapple, fennel, and sandalwood. And it works. And I hate licorice, but the scent together and the way it projects and dries down is fantastic. And it really took me by surprise. And so I think a lot of people need to kind of venture outside the norm, and I think that's kind of what drives people to want to try something different. You know, like you were saying, soap is starting to peak. So what is it now that's going to discern different people? Is it the pretty labeling? Is it the packaging? Is it the company name? Is it the fragrances? Is it the way you say the fragrances? And I think that's, at this point, with it being so oversaturated, what is drawing people in and making things different, and what drives you to create these things? And I think, like you were saying, is that you're trying to do something different and, you know, make smells that either don't exist anymore or don't exist like they used to. And you're either trying to bring them back, or something has inspired you, like your What's, and I think that's great.
Good. Well, I'm glad somebody gets it. Sorry, somebody said they wanted to see my neck. Here's my neck.
I saw that.
Sorry, I have no other comfortable way to hold the phone up, so you're sitting on one of my label shelves right now. So
that's great. No, a couple other questions for you from my audience. If somebody says you've done tea scents before, have you thought about doing a soda?
I hadn't. Mostly because I think it's, in a lot of respects, I think it's kind of an overdone idea.
Okay.
Probably the best one that I saw was Tallow and Steel's, the cola thing. I don't remember what they called it, but their cola thing I thought was really cool. Although I know they had some allergen problems with it, which was unfortunate.
True. Yeah.
But I like to do things that are a little bit more out there than that. When I do a gourmand, I like to do things that are a little bit stranger than a soda. It just doesn't, personally, it just doesn't appeal to me too much.
So are you building scents based off of your life experiences and nostalgia? Is that what you're going for?
Like Behold the What's was very much that kind of thing. Interestingly, I came up with the name Behold the What's before I came up with anything else. I was filling aftershave or something. And all of a sudden this idea hit me, and I don't even know what I was thinking about at the time, but I was like, oh my God, we should do a soap that's a tribute to Dr. Seuss and call it Behold the What's.
Yeah.
And my mother was like, why? And I was like, I don't know, because it seems like a cool idea. So, you know, In some respects, in some ways, it's life experience. In some cases, it's just something that I'll see on the street or smell on the street. In some cases, it's something I'll read or think about or hear. Fougere Gothique was largely inspired by Sympathy for the Devil. And I took a lot of crap about that one.
That's okay. Rapid fire. Somebody, the Razor Company said, ask Will if he does not make a bomb, why he does not make a bomb. And somebody also said, will night music ever return?
Okay, so in order, we don't do a bomb because I haven't managed to turn one out that I really like. We did Wonder Balm a few years ago, but it was more of an oil than anything, and it worked really well for irritation, but a lot of people found it very strange. Protected your skin really well from the cold and from moisture loss, and it helped prevent dry skin, but I think it was just a little too weird for most people. And so I've been tinkering with balms on and off over the years. I've tinkered with gels, I've worked on balms, I've done lotions, I've done all kinds of things. And I just haven't found something that I haven't managed to come up with something that I really like enough to sell it as a Barrister and Mann product. And so it's something that I've been working on for quite some time. It's definitely not a dead idea, and I very much understand that people are looking for balms from us, but I just haven't been able to put together something that I'm really, really happy with.
Well, and that's great. I would prefer you to be honest and be open about it than just throw something out there just to satisfy people. That shows your determination. It shows that you have consistency. And I know, like I said, when people say, what are your top soaps? B&M is always thrown in there. So obviously consistency is huge for you guys. And, I respect and I appreciate that you're not just throwing it out there just to satisfy people.
Good. Thank you. As for night music, I don't think so. And the reason that I don't think so is that, and this is not a story that I have shared publicly, but this is a story that I will share now. Night music was largely created as a tribute to my grandmother because it was inspired heavily by the classic Guerlain fragrance Shalimar. When my mother was little, my mother co-owns the company with me, for those who don't know that. When my mother was little, my grandfather was a director at the Chicago Board of Trade. To this day, I believe he is the youngest director ever at the Board of Trade. So in mid-century Chicago, to be a director at the Board of Trade meant, a lot of entertaining and whining and dining and hard partying and, going out to dinner with, people who were buying thousands of tons of grain and whatnot. Yeah. My grandfather always bought my grandmother Shalimar, which back in the day was in rather better shape than it is now. Shalimar has gone through a whole lot of reformulations over the years and is not really what it once was. So, and this is when my mother and my aunt were little kids. My mother was like 4, my aunt was 3, I think. And so before she'd go out, my grandmother would give the girls a bath, and she'd dress them up in their pajamas, and she had Shalimar dusting powder, which is, kind of like talcum powder, but more geared toward women. Yeah. And so they still make it, and I actually bought my mother a container of Shalimar dusting powder recently for her birthday. And it comes with like this big powder puff, and, you powder your face or whatnot. And so she would sprinkle it over the girls, and my mother has said to me it made us feel like little princesses. And that's a very, very special memory for Mom. And so she and I designed the fragrance together, and when it was received the way it was, it's emblematic almost more than anything else of a fragrance that I thought was really cool, and I just did not see the reaction coming. I really did, and I said to Mom, I was like, there might be a few people who are not really into this, but it should be pretty cool. And there are a lot of people who find it just absolutely disgusting. And I guess our first mistake was putting something that personal on the market in the first place and exposing it to people's sort of, unfiltered feedback. I guess we should. That was probably semi-reckless, but you know, the die is cast, to quote Caesar, and my mother was hurt. I think more than anything else, it upset her to see people receive it in that way, and so more for her peace of mind than for mine, I think it's going to remain retired.
No, and I respect that 100%. I haven't spelled it personally based on your story. Now I want to. But, you know, scent is subjective. Scent is very heavily tied to memories and nostalgia, and something that you have created that makes feel amazing to you, that reminds you of that point in time, to other person just may not make sense. And, you know, I get that, and I appreciate your honesty with it. And I don't mean to kind of cut things off, but I think we've only got 5 minutes before Instagram tells us to get the hell out. So, so a few things before I call this a night is anything new coming out, anything that we can be looking forward to, and anything else you want to say, because the red carpet is yours. I rolled it out. This is your time. You have 5 minutes. Other than that, I'm cutting you off.
No, I mean, we're in the process of kind of shoring up the line, and you know, the thing about wet shaving companies is that they grow organically and they tend to sprawl. I can't speak for Rod, but I would say that Sterling's lateral product offerings are considerable. You know, they offer balm and toner and bath soap and shaving soap and, you know, I don't even know what else. EDT, they offer a lot of things, and that's great. And it's great that they have a market for that. In our case, we're trying to sort of inject some consistency and some uniformity into what we do. So we're in the process of bringing out the rest of the Barrister's Reserve Eau de Colognes. We have Fern and Waves coming out next month. Actually, I'm taking the bottles to be screen printed tomorrow, which is why we couldn't do this tomorrow.
No worries.
We are in the process of reformulating our pomade. I kind of grew dissatisfied with where our pomade was. We were having it made for us, and a lot of people found it kind of weird to use. And I was like, all right, well, you know what? Maybe it's time that we sat down and really brought something together that reflects more Barrister and Mann's design methodology than somebody else's design methodology. And so I've been working to design a more user-friendly version of the pomade, which will be available in 4-ounce jars rather than 2-ounce jars. But we'll still largely stick to the Barrister's Reserve fragrances for the most part.
Cool. I have 2 last questions for you before they kick us off. Somebody who hasn't tried B&M before, what fragrances would you recommend personally? And then from somebody like me, let's say you and I have an interview a year from now, where do you want to see Barrister and Mann?
To try, so if you haven't tried it before, I would try Seville and La Vanille, and make sure you use a synthetic brush for La Vanille.
Okay.
In a year's time, I don't fully know. You know, it's one of those things where a lot of this business is played by ear. I would love to tell you that we will be a multinational giant in taking on Gillette, and I will also tell you that that's complete bullshit, and it will never be. Because the thing is, in order to do that, you need an economy of scale, and there isn't really an economy of scale.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Everything we do was made by hand. So in some form or another. So, you know, I don't know. The future is uncertain, and in some respects, I sort of like it that way.
Yeah, it makes it exciting. I love your journey. I love the fact that you took time out of your busy schedule to grace me with your presence on my channel. I know I don't want to blow your ego up too much, but you know, I appreciate you taking the time to come on. I know my audience is very, very excited that you made it, and I was glad I was able to pick your brain a little bit. Is there anything else that you want to add to this?
I shave happy.
Shave happy. I like it. I like it. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Will, so much for coming on. I think we're good here. Appreciate you, buddy.
Bye.
Thanks, guys, for watching. This was an honor. This was amazing, and I can't believe it happened. Thank you so much for watching. I love you all, and I'll catch you in the next interview.